Tosh Kano, Hiroshima, World War II. Tosh is my Japanese-American survivor who survived the atomic bombing on Hiroshima. Can you believe it? He says he's the youngest survivor ever, American, that has survived the atomic bombing, the first bomb, in August of 1945. He has a great story to tell you today from his eyes and ears. This is a rare glimpse, folks, into history. This is one of these stories that's been in my archives, and it's just like chomping at the bits to get out here, and it's happening right now. So Tosh is in his late 70s now. I interviewed him in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, August 17, 2005. It's coming up on 19 years next year, and it's just one of my most unique stories. It's not a combat story. He wasn't in combat, but folks, let me tell you what his father did. And there's pictures after this introduction of his father. His father was a Japanese officer, and he served in the Japanese military, obviously. He trained troops to go to Iwo Jima. And if you know your history, Iwo Jima was the bloodiest battle our Marines ever fought. But this man trained troops, and he used to feel sorry for them, Tosh said, because he knew they weren't coming back. And these are young men, and they went there and to their death. And he tells a wild, just an amazing story, and how the Japanese accepted the defeat when we defeated them. After the bombs were dropped, they surrendered, and again, it's just one of those stories that I'm so happy to share with you. I want to thank Steve and Abby Risso for making it possible for you to watch Tosh's story. Steve and Abby, thank you for your support of my work and for your support of our veterans and our country, standing up for us and fighting for the freedoms that our veterans fought for. So thank you, Steve and Abby. God bless you, and I'm just looking forward to continue working with you and seeing you soon. Folks, if you'd like to sponsor a story like Steve and Abby have, there's information in the video description below the video. On my website, larrycappetto.com, click on Sponsor a Veteran. It's a newly redesigned page with pictures of my veterans. I've added more Vietnam stories, so if you would like to sponsor a story, click on the picture of the veteran and include their name in the sponsorship, and I'll do the rest. If you'd like to donate to my work, I'd encourage you to do so. Be greatly appreciated on my in the comments section of the video. The first comment is mine, and there's a link in there to donate. So, folks, this is amazing. Voices of history. I mean, who would have thought 20 years ago? Oh, so much has happened, and this is so. It's a fight. I'll tell you what. This is a fight. We're in a battle right now in our country, in our world, and embedded in these stories is why the enemy hates America. They hate freedom, folks. They don't want you to do what you want. They want you to be controlled by what they say, propaganda and fear. But it's the truth. We're fighting an enemy out there, and we need to share these stories, folks. Embedded in these stories is why we've been free all these years. I just challenge you with that, and think about that. And those who would try to erase history, I just released my Holocaust film, re-released it. Deniers out there of the Holocaust, they hate this stuff. They hate what we're sharing here, but we're going to continue doing it because it's powerful. So many people being helped and blessed and healed through these stories, our veterans and families being reunited. And I get testimonies all the time. And thank you for watching and listening and supporting this channel and my radio station, Voices of History Radio, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Listener supported. Like I said, I don't sell advertisement. And I rely on the support of you, the viewers and listeners. So if you think somebody else is going to do it, it's probably your turn to get in line. Amen. Thank you for your help and support. Enjoy Tosh's story. Let me know what you think about this. A rare and unique opportunity to look from the Japanese perspective of what happened back at the end of World War II. God bless you. this is a little different for me. Tell me, now, where were you born?
I was born in Hiroshima, Japan.
Okay. And that was 1940?
It was 1946, March 1st. It was 6 months after the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Now, so you were born after or before the bombing?
After.
Okay.
I was 12 weeks along inside of my mother.
Okay. And so you told me on the phone that you were the youngest known survivor. Say that, tell me again.
As far as I know, I am the youngest American survivor of the A-bomb in Hiroshima.
Of course, you told me, was it your brother that was killed or your sister?
Well, I have a sister, and my elder brother was 18 months old at that time, and he passed away 2 months after the bomb.
What do you remember or were told about that whole thing, the bombs, the war? I mean, just give me a little summary of what was told and what you remember back then.
Well, the one thing that I clearly remember listening to my mother and my father was that both indicated that it's very difficult to put in words, indescribable, what they saw that day. But as the days and years went by, they kind of told me bit by bit what really happened that day. And also my father had left me a manuscript describing what happened that day. So reading those manuscripts and listening to both my mother and my father, I have pretty good indication what really happened that day. And the thing that it really stands out is that it was a total surprise for them. And my father thought that there was an explosion right next to him, and he probably thought maybe it was a 500-pound bomb blew up next to him because he was thrown all the way across the street into a ditch. And my mother thought the same thing because the entire house that she was in was totally destroyed. So she really didn't know what really happened, but she knew that it was a huge, huge explosion. And my mother, of course, she kept telling me that when this happened, she remembered the first thing it happened, she was sitting in the living room with my sister and my brother in her arms. The force came from the underneath, and she was uplifted from the floor. And then in the process, she lost her son because she was uplifted. And then split second later, she said that the force came from the top, smashing them like a sandwiched in. And when the force came from the top, she remembered one of the main supporting beam, the support in the house, was coming toward her, falling toward her. And of course that knocked her out. She doesn't know how long she was unconscious. But during this unconscious stage, she clearly remembered a voice calling her by the first name. Her name is Shizue, and calling her 3 times. Shizue, 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 wake up. And of course she woke up on the 3rd command. And when she woke up, everything was just absolutely red and hot to her skin. she thought house was burning. So she really panicked and she started looking for my brother and my sister, of course. And she couldn't see, but she could hear their voices, cries from the top of their, lungs, whatever, just crying their heads off. And so she kind of got on her knees and hands and started approaching toward their cry. And she found the leg of my brother sticking out of the debris. So she removed the debris and got him out by his legs. And then when she did that, she could feel the blood was gushing out of his head. And she was certainly that his head was crushed by the force. So she started feeding his head, but everything seems to be okay. But the blood was just squirting right out of his head. So she tried to hold him, but he refused to be held. And he stuck his arm out, didn't want to be held. But somehow she got hold of him and then went look for my sister. Same way, she was upside down in the debris and her legs were sticking out, so she yanked her out. And when she did that, my sister had this cloth belt from the shoulder hanging. That cloth belt, she was playing just before the bomb exploded. It's a belt that the Japanese women usually tie their babies on their backs. So she got that belt and then tied my sister on her back and then hold my brother on her arm. And the next thing she wanted to do is look for a way to get out of the house. So she looked toward the main gate or entranceway. Even though the house was totally collapsed, the sliding door was intact, open. And not a single glass pane was broken. So she just got on her knees and went to the entranceway and walked out. And of course, when she walked out, everything was flat. And then we were right by the Hiroshima castle. And so she looked to the right shoulder, hoping that the castle still exists. It's gone. It was simply not there. So she knew there was something traumatic things happened. And then she was kind of wondering and dazed. And then this lady, she didn't know who she was, but she came up to her and asking her to help her boy. She had her boy in her arms. And it's obvious this boy is dead. I mean, he probably was playing outside, and what happened was the flying object slit his tummy wide open, and the internal organ was hanging out. And she was asking my mother to help this boy. Of course, he tried to tell this lady there's nothing she could do, but she would not listen. And pretty soon, this lady just took off. And then she started to hear the cry of help from a neighbor. So she went toward that and saw the neighbor halfway out of the house, but house was right on top of her. And so she tried to yank her out of the house, but there's no way she could move her. So she told her that I'm going to my husband's headquarters and I will get you help, so please be patient. And then she took off. And my father at that time was a major in the civil engineering corps for the Japanese army. So when she walked through the headquarters, the whole building of the headquarters was gone, except my father's barracks, where he had his office. Even though it's damaged and leaning, ready to collapse, but still standing. And then my father was on his horse in his underwear directing his men. So she goes over there and put on his sword, but he couldn't recognize her because when she got knocked out, she didn't realize that she was cut on the forehead and the blood was gushing from her head. And remember I told you that she saw nothing but red? That was her blood going into her eyes. And then, of course, she got cut right over here, over the vein. So she was breathing here, and the blast took all of her clothes away. So she was nude, except she had the cloth belt with a family, what do you call it, emblem. So he could recognize that and said, "Are you Shizue?" And of course she said yes. So he took her immediately to the first aid station and to be taken care of. So that was her story. And I clearly remember her telling us that voice, calling her name. It was a woman's voice. And to me, that was the most amazing thing. Without that, I would not be here today. And she would not be here today. And for my father's story, when the bomb exploded, he was even closer to the center. Oh, by the way, my mother, where she was, 800 meters from the center. My father was 600 yards from the center. Like I mentioned to you, he was a major in the civil engineering corps. In Japan, when you get to be a major, instead of giving you a motor vehicle to commute to the headquarters, Japanese army give you horse to ride to the headquarters, and that horse is being taken care of by a private first class. On August 6, 1945, the private first class, the responsible for my father's horse, overslept. So he didn't get there on time that day. And not only that, that night and early mornings, everybody from the headquarters were out in the city ready for firebombing because they heard that Nagasaki, not Nagasaki, Nagoya and Osaka was already firebombed. And they said, well, the Hiroshima is going to be next. So we had to be out prepared. See, the fire incinerator bomb will come down slowly. So if you have a chance, you could knock it out with a baseball bat or bucket so they won't fall on the house. So they were all out prepared for that. So my father was, of course, nothing happened that night. And my father's men were really tired. So before he went home, he told them that, listen, guys, don't go out and do a morning exercises. You go ahead and eat the breakfast. Wait for me till I get there. So stay inside of the barracks. So the private first class was late. Usually he comes about 15 to 8. Didn't come. So my father was a very punctual person, so he got impatient and decided to ride a bicycle to the headquarters. So he pulled out the bicycle, started riding toward the headquarters. About half a block from our house, both of the tires on the bicycle went flat. So he was cussing and moaning, pushed back the bicycle back to the home, and he told my mother, "I'm going to walk." But just before he left, he said, "You know, my horse didn't come. My bicycle's tire went flat, both of them. I just feel uneasy this morning. So make sure you don't let my daughter come up with me. You keep her at home, and you yourself stay inside of the house." And left. And he was one step outside of the overpass when bomb exploded. And he was completely inside of the shadow of the overpass, except from the neck, shoulder up. So when that exposed his head, back of his head, he got burned, but every place else was okay. Anyway, he so that structure became like a cannon, and he was a cannonball. The force came right through that structure, and he got thrown about 300 feet into a ditch. And then well, just before he went in, he saw 3 junior high school girls walking directly opposite from him, going the other way. And he heard the B-29 buzzing sound coming toward the center of the city, so he looked up, and sure enough, 2 B-29 coming in. One took off, one continued to come toward the center of the city. So he warned the girls, "Don't mess around. Just mind your business, go straight to school." And of course, a few minutes later, bomb dropped and exploded. So when he came out of the ditch, he lost his glasses, of course, got blown away, and he couldn't see anything. Besides, there was so much dust and debris. He just had to get on his knees and hands to get out of the ditch, and he touched something that was burning. When I say burning, smothering. And so he put his nose to it. He was one of the girls that he just spoke a minute earlier, excuse me. So they were out on the outside of the overpass, exposed to the light, and they were burning. So he got his composure back, and he started to run toward the headquarters. And he said pretty soon that his uniform, the summer uniform he had, the khaki shirt, the pocket fell out, his sleeve fell out, buttons fell out, and his pants disintegrated. In other words, all of the seam in his uniform disintegrated. Wind up, when he got to the headquarters, he had nothing but a white t-shirt and a white boxer short with his belt and a sword and his pistol. The intense heat of that bomb just crumbled the seams. But when he got to the headquarters, he was just absolutely shocked. Not a single building left except his barrack. And one of his men came out to greet him, and so he asked my father, he said, "Are you okay, Mr. Kano? we are all present, accounted for. Some of them are injured, but all accounted for, but nobody else. What happened was that everybody was out in the field doing morning exercises because it was after breakfast, except my father's division. They were resting till my father got there. So as soon as he found out that nobody else is here, he told his men to gather themselves, and we had to come up with a plan of attack. First thing he came to his mind was three things. We need to take shelter. We thought we have to find a good, safe shelter. The next will be food and water. So he asked his men to find a shelter and find anything that they could find which is edible and drinking water, take it to the shelter. And that's what he was doing when my mother showed up. And so both my father and my mother, I feel that it was absolutely lucky. We happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, but everything went in their way, so we were able to survive. And we stayed in our bomb shelter for next 2 months. Now, my father said, well, being one of the only high-ranking officer that survived the bomb, and being a civil engineer, natural for him to get the responsibility of cleanup, emergency operation, to clear the roads and get the infrastructure to best to the go back into operational. So he could not stay in a bomb shelter all this time. He had to go out into the city, clean up the city, gather all the dead bodies, and dispose them. So he was exposed to a lot of fallout radiations. But interesting thing, a lot of people probably didn't realize this, but that the city did not burn immediately after the bomb exploded. You see a documentary, you see this flash next to the building, you see the smoke going up. That is burning. But next thing you realized, it created a vacuum at the center. So it took all the air out and extinguished whatever the thing was burning. And then went up 30,000 feet in the air. So it took about 20 minutes for everything to burn. So you remember our neighbor that was stuck under the house halfway? My mother told my father to go help her. So he dispatched a couple of his men to help this lady. They could see her halfway out of the building debris, and everything caught on fire just spontaneously. And they couldn't even get to her at all. So they had to retrieve without helping her. So it took 20 minutes to burn. Now, not only that, about 4 hours after the bomb, the wind came and the sky got dark, and the black rain, black hail started to come out of the sky. So it took 4 hours for the fallout to come down into the city. Now, say that you survived the, just like my mother, in the inside of the house, and you were able to survive the initial blast, and you are walking in the days out in the open. You get exposed by the rain and hail. But my parents were inside of the bomb shelter when this happened. So my mother, my father was never exposed to that black rain or the hail. But my father had to go out there, do his duties. So he got exposed to a tremendous amount of full-rod radiation. But my mother and myself, my sister, my brother, was never exposed to that, even though we have absorbed tremendous amount of initial radiation. But that was just a short time exposure. So we were able to survive. And my brother was so young, only 18 months old, so he was recovering perfectly. But 2 months after, we had to go back into our country house, which was 20 miles away from the center of this Hiroshima. So my father transported him with him on his back and rode the bicycle back to the country home. And he died that night from internal injury because he shook him up. And so I never had a chance to see him, but my sister, my brother, my mother, and I seems to be in perfect health. It's because we were not exposed to the radiation, and we feel that, especially my mother, feel that we survived this for a purpose. And she said we need to do everything we can to convey a message to the world that no matter what happens, no matter how much we disagree, we cannot use the atomic weapon to resolve the issue. And she and I firmly believe that we cannot do that, and we were here for that purpose, to send the message out to the people. Here I am, we survived because everything went okay, but the next time we're not going to be that lucky. Not only the people that at that place, but everybody around us, that area, it is going to be jeopardizing their lives. Because, they said, well, everybody was said, well, what's so significant about the atomic bomb? Well, there's a difference between a nuclear weapon and a conventional weapon. Nuclear weapon, just a one bomb, have done so much damage. And not only that, effect of that bomb lasts for almost forever. People in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is still dying from the radiation effect. And every single year, people are still dying from that. And that was all due to one single bomb. Now, they say, well, that Tokyo or Dresden, a lot of people died too. But you have to understand, that took a lot of massive amount of bombing. But in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, only took one bomb each. So that's what's so significant about it. And the effect lasts forever. Matter of fact, as I indicated to you, Larry, that I have my son. I didn't think that I could have a normal son because there was so much talk about among the victims, the child will not come out normal, will be deformed. So I was so afraid that maybe I'm not capable of producing a normal child. So in Japan, when people find out that you are the atomic bomb victim, you are kind of discriminated from a good jobs, or marrying somebody. The girls will not consider you to be a mate because they feel that you're different. So, you know, as you can see that not only a psychological impact, there's a physical impact that lasts for a long, long time. So that's one of the reasons that we cannot afford to use that nuclear weapon ever again. So I'm hoping that will be my message to the rest of the world, that we'll have to somehow come up to a consensus, resolution to a conflict without using the nuclear weapons. But so many countries now have so many nuclear weapons, I think it is going to be very difficult. But my position is to send a message to the world that it was a terrible weapon. And you know, a lot of people say, well, why did you come to the United States? You know, one guy asked me, well, you lost your brother. Why are you here? Well, I hate to tell you this, but my father and my mother is American citizen. So that's why I'm here. I love America. And I happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And the war is a tragedy. You know, we have to, so I don't want to talk about whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision. I mean, that's done. Done is done. Now I need to move forward to talk about what is going to happen next. And we certainly cannot use this type of weapon to against anybody.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned it was a surprise to the people that that bomb was dropped, but wasn't the first bomb dropped a day or two earlier, Nagasaki?
It was 3 days.
Okay, so that one was dropped.
Yes.
Wasn't there fear that there might be another one?
Well, I don't think there was any, the Japanese side, I don't think they had any idea the American side had additional bombs. And there was, when the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, they have never even imagined that nuclear weapon will be used against them. They thought America will use the firebomb if they're going to use anything. And there was no prior warning or no notion whatsoever. It was totally kept away from everybody. So it was a total surprise.
Put in perspective what happened on September 11th in New York City and how the country couldn't believe what they're seeing and losing 3,500 lives versus hundreds of thousands that were killed over there in Japan. Can you even put that? Can you even compare that? Those although to this country it was huge, but after going through something like that, I think it's part of our history we're forgetting. Nobody can even remember or chooses to remember, but that hundreds of thousands of Japanese were killed, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Can we forget that?
Well, I don't think we could ever forget that. I don't think we should forget it. And I think however, I think we all learn a lesson from that. That nuclear weapon is a terrible weapon, not only at that moment, but it, fallout radiation and the effect will last forever. Matter of fact, the scientists thought that nothing will grow in Hiroshima for 100 years. So the scientists, the problem with the nuclear weapon is that nobody knows the long-term impact. And that's what our family fears the most. What is going to happen to me, to my son, and their sons? Because once the radiation alters the genes, it might pop up all of a sudden. So we really don't know. So I think it's difficult to put in words and understand this enormous impact. Yes, it was a terrible for these 3,000 people, whatever, passed away on 9/11. But when you start talking about 140,000 people died in instant, and another 100,000 died a couple months later. That's absolutely mind-boggling. And that was due to just one single bomb.
It's just like you said, it's mind-boggling, and you just can't even imagine it, how that could happen.
And I don't think anybody understood what the real impact was back in those days.
Can I ask you a question? I don't know if you can answer this, but of course my mind's been wrapped up with Iwo Jima, talking about it, really just talking to the Americans. Did you know anything? Did you learn anything about Iwo Jima after you started growing up, or what it was referred to, or what the Japanese people thought of that battle, or is it even remembered? And then secondly, the mentality of the Japanese soldiers, because I guess General Kobayashi had told them to kill 10 Americans before they were killed, and a lot of them wouldn't surrender. I mean, is that the way of life of a Japanese soldier, to die for their emperor or whatever? I mean, I asked you two questions, but just what about Iwo Jima, and then maybe the mentality of the Japanese soldier?
Well, the one thing I remember about Iwo Jima was that toward the end of the war, before the Iwo Jima battle took place, my father was given the responsibility of training these people that went to Iwo Jima. And my father clearly indicated to me that every day he came back from that training, he felt really sad for those people that are going to Iwo Jima, because these people are not professional soldiers. These were young men, crippled, and old men. And he felt like he was sending these people to death. And he felt sorry for them because he knew that they are not going to come back. But anybody that could pick up a grenade or a pistol with one eye, one arm, one leg, went to Iwo Jima. So it was a last desperate mission. Yes, there were some professional soldiers in Iwo Jima, but most of those people that hidden inside of Suebachi was young, old, and crippled. So that's why the Japanese side took such a tremendous casualty, and most of them died not because of the bullets, because of the dysenteries and other sickness, being cooked up in wet, humid living conditions, because they were not a perfect human being to begin with. So that's the thing that I remember about Iwo Jima, that my father told me clearly it was a real tragedy. And Japanese mentality at that time, they would do anything to save the emperor. And they were dying for the emperor. So I'm sure these people were gladly to go for emperor. They had no other ideas except that. So there's a huge mentality difference between American side and the Japanese side. Japanese side, they went to war because they were dying for the emperor. The American side went to the war because they have to kill our enemy to survive and preserve our country. So at the end, when the finally war came to end, yes, there was some hardcore Japanese that didn't want to lose, but it was almost like a relief. The war's over, and for the first time in the Japanese history, they lost the war. Somebody beat them. So when that happened, the Japanese people accepted it. They lost the war. They're the loser. So they were easily transform themselves to go beyond that. The American side, on the other hand, they were told that you have to kill the enemy to survive and preserve the country. At the end of the war, they realized they won the war, but there are a lot of psychological impact, the hardship, and it's hard for them to forget the enemy. But the Japanese side, they just accepted as a loser. War's over. It's like when you go out in the jungle. If you want to capture a gorilla, which is the king of the apes, massive 500, 600-pound gorilla, it's obvious you can't just walk up to him and capture the gorilla. So do you know what they do? They drive him and drive him to the top of the tree. And then all the natives get on the bottom of the tree trunk and start shaking the tree back and forth, back and forth. And pretty soon, 2 hours, 3 hours later, they lose their grip, fall to the bottom. Once the gorilla fell down from the tree, it's like a baby. So they just put a net around it, pick him up, put him in a cage. The Japanese is like that. They are fierce, one of the most well-trained soldiers and disciplined people. But once they found out somebody else beat them, they accepted it. So they are willing to adapt to a new life. And that's what happened to them. Since MacArthur gave them a new constitution, new way of life, they took it and run with it.
Is it like that today over in Japan? I mean, how do they feel? Do they hold grudges? How do they feel about the Americans and maybe what did happen at Iwo Jima or just World War II? I mean, they're forgiving, they forgot it, they've gone on. Do they even think about it? Do they even teach it in their schools anymore?
I think they still do, because I think the young people needs to know the tragedy of the war. But they also teach how Americans have changed their way of lives and accepting the Western way of living. So I remember when General Eisenhower wanted to come to Japan to visit. This was late 50s. 500,000 students came out in Tokyo protest against Eisenhower's visit. But that was all orchestrated by the socialistic or communist, socialist and the communist parties. They were paid. So, unfortunately, the news media in this country took that and flashed that through the screen, saying that Japanese people were protesting against the Eisenhower coming. But that's not really what happened. The true Japanese people are very grateful for Americans for helping them after the war and bringing them into the new era. So very few of them hold grudges against the United States. Oh yes, there's always a radical group that's trying to stir up things and trying to portray the Japanese hates American. But majority of the Japanese love Americans. Anything labeled American, they love to possess. And it's just fascinating. You know, a lot of people say that, well, we were kind of afraid to go visit Hiroshima because we dropped the bomb on them. Maybe we're going to get stoned or something. No, they were welcomed with open arms. And Americans don't understand that. We have a very difficult time understanding what is the matter with these people. But like I mentioned to you, they just accepted. It was a war. They lost. Over. And so it's you know, when I got married to a white girl from North Dakota, she's half German, half Swede. Father was 100% German. He was a little reluctant to let her daughter marry Japanese because he heard some horrible stories back in 1940s, all these horrible Japanese, and so he remembers that. So he was really reluctant to let his daughter marry a Japanese, but when he met me, all the fear just disappeared. So it's, you know, it's interesting, very interesting between the two different philosophies of accepting the war. And imagine, you know, that even today, I think we are having a real difficult time trying to understand why these people hate us. I'm talking about from Middle East. Why they have a bitter feeling toward us? It's the same scenario that they were taught, how horrible their enemy, which is Americans, but we're trying to understand what is happening, because generally American people are well, what do you call it, good-to-do people. They love to assist people in needs. We have assisted many countries. So somebody comes along all of a sudden hating us, we have a real tough time understanding. But Japanese people also cannot understand to the same extent why some of these Americans hate them so much, because they don't hate Americans. But it's a different philosophy between the two countries.
I wanted to ask you this before I run out of my tape here, but why did the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor? What was the interest of that, or was it to taunt them to fight? I mean, what was the goal of Japan at that time?
Japan wanted to gain advantage because they had this huge plan to expand their forces in Southeast Asia. There was two things was stopping them. Pacific Fleet in Hawaii, Pacific Air Force in Clark Air Force Base. So those two, the military officials thought, has to be destroyed in order to gain time to expand their territory. So a lot of people don't understand, December the 7th, it was not just a Pearl Harbor. At the same time, Clark Air Force Base was destroyed by the Japanese Air Force. So that was the mentality of the Japanese military, that they wanted to gain the upper hand. So they could get, they had no idea the American would come back that quickly. They totally underestimated our ability to bounce back. I mean, it was shock to them because, gosh, you know, within 6 months, some of those ships that was destroyed was sailing into Pacific. So it was a total shock. And they had, I don't think they have no idea what American capability of material-wise and ability to bounce back. And those military people certainly underestimated that. There was one, however, there was one person in the military officials knew what they done. That was Admiral Yamamoto. He knew that this was the beginning of the end. But he was just a one voice among all, many, so he could not do anything. But I tell you, so one thing about the America is that we do bounce back real strong. Yes, we might be slow in the decision making, but once we made up our mind, once we get pushed to the corners, we certainly bounce back fiercely.
Do you have any other thoughts, Tosh, about Iwo Jima, about your father? I didn't realize he had helped train men that went there. That was very interesting what you told me. I never heard that before. The Americans think that the Japanese were all elite fighting soldiers, and you gave me a good perspective of that. I appreciate that.
There was some of them that was elite.
But do you have any other comments on Iwo Jima historically or personally about the island, the invasion, about the strategic importance of the island for us? I mean, any other comments about Iwo Jima that you feel that maybe you could tell me?
Well, like I mentioned to you, my father said that was a last desperate effort. And that's the only thing that I could remember about Iwo Jima. And the same case for Okinawa. Junior high school students was sent there to fight. And you're talking about between 12 and 15. And that was a real desperate measure. So when you get toward the end of the war, Japanese military was desperate. They would do anything to trying to combat the American forces, to slow them down or whatever. And also my my mother remembers she was ordered to attend a neighborhood meeting, and she was taught how to use the bamboo stick as a weapon. So when the Allied forces came ashore, they were supposed to stick them with a bamboo. So, I mean, what the chances do they have fighting against against the bullet and a bamboo stick. So you could see the mentality toward the end of the war. Japanese were real desperate, and everybody talks about the kamikazes, and that was a strictly a voluntary effort. Nobody was forced or strapped into the seat. These junior high students went voluntary. It was part of honor. So when you start using 12 and 15-year-olds, you gotta be desperate.
That's how young the kamikaze pilots were, 12 and 15? That leads me to another question. Maybe the perception of the Americans at the time was that the Japanese didn't value their lives, and so they were just willing to die and all this, but that's not true after talking to you. But do you think the Japanese people value their life any less than the Americans do?
No. They value their lives just as much. Let me give you another personal story. Every man, soldiers, went to war. The mother have given that soldier painstakingly, got 1,000 stitches on their belt. Mothers stand on the corner of the street asking everybody to pass by make a 1 stitch in the cloth belt. Symbol of good luck. 1,000 stitches saved there from bullet. So every soldier that went to war had that in their possession. So you could see the love and the commitment. See? So the Japanese people certainly value their lives just as well as the Americans. I don't think that was ever told in the American side. And every time my father said, every time some of his men were killed and their life was spared, they're supposed to take 1 stitch out of that cloth belt. And I asked my father one time, what would you do if you run out of the stitch?
The Japanese were in caves and tunnels in Iwo Jima, and to the Americans it was hard on the morale. They didn't ever see the Japanese soldiers for a lot of times, and they were in the island. They weren't on the island. They were in the island, and it was almost an unseen enemy. Do you have any more information about the tunnels or caves? Or I heard there's 27 miles of tunnels. Or did your father ever talk about the cave system there or whatever that?
All I know is that they stayed in that caves for so many days under terrible condition. That's the only thing I know. It must have been a horrible to live in that tunnel. Yes, they were alive, but imagine they suffered a lot from total humidity, heat, and the contaminated food or whatever. It must have been horrible to survive that. And so I don't think that side of the story was ever told. You know, everybody thought that here's a fierce warriors that coming out of the hole and shooting at the Marine Corps and killing the Marines. But a lot of them are down in a pit, half alive.
Well, you know, the first few hours on that beach on Iwo Jima, supposedly the General Kuribashi allowed the Marines to get on the beach, and they congested the beach, and then they opened up with their mortars and their artillery, and they're very accurate, and they killed a lot of the Marines right there. So they were skilled at what they were doing. And again, I'm coming from the American perspective. It was a very frightening time for the Americans, and I don't know if your father ever talked about that, but there were...
I suspect that those are the well-trained elite group of soldiers that they had. But they needed a massive amount of manpower to fight. So there was a lot of inexperienced people in the tunnel, ready to be deployed. And but I believe initially these elite, well-trained, well-equipped people are out there against the American forces. But I think the general's idea was as they depleted on the manpower, they were going to use all those people in the tunnel to combat the American forces. But I don't think those people were ready to really fight American forces because of the physical ability. Like I mentioned to you, I always felt that I had a mission. And my wife said it's not time. So my wife and I have a different perspective. Yes, she wants me to tell what happened, but she also understands there are veterans that fought in the fierce hand-to-hand combat with the Japanese forces. They are a bitter feeling. So she said it's not time for me to tell our side because I guess she's afraid that she doesn't want us to be identified as what do you call it? It's not the enemy, but she just doesn't want to expose ourselves to those bitter feelings. But I always felt that somehow I need to tell our side. In fact, my father's manuscript is called Other Side of the Fence. And someday I would try everything I can to continue to tell what happened that particular time or what happened to the Japanese people. Because you hear so much about American side. And I imagine, these people that you have spoken with, it's unmentionable, unspeakable horror that they went through. Because as you know, any war is a horrible thing for anybody to go through. But every story, there's the other side. And I feel that I have a responsibility of telling the other side of the story.
I agree. Yeah, it needs to be told. Well, I asked all the veterans of World War II this question, and I'm going to ask you this question too. Living in this country, knowing your heritage, where you've come from, what does freedom mean to you, Tosh?
Freedom means to me is the ability to work hard and able to be whatever you want to be. You'll be able to speak, you'll be able to study, you'll be able to do whatever you feel like, and you'll be able to get to where you want to go. You know, Larry, if I stayed in Japan, unfortunately, this is I think the biggest tragedy of them all, I would never be given the opportunity to marry and have a good paying position because I'm a victim of a bomb. In this country, when I came to this country in 1961, like I was born again, given a new chance to grow. Because it's all up to me, to whoever I want to be. And I think a lot of people in the United States just take it for granted for what we have. Because if you really wanted to be what you want to be, as long as you strive for that, you'll be given opportunity to get there. Yes, sometimes you're going to have a real tough time. But as long as you work at it, you're going to be given the opportunity to get there eventually. But to me, that is the freedom of, as long as you have a mind to work hard to get to what you want to be, you will be given the opportunity. But in some countries, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be given the opportunity. For example, like Japan. If you cannot pass the examination, written examination to a passing grade, to going from junior high school to high school entrance examination, you are not going to be given opportunity to go any higher. No matter how hard you try, you have to pass that test. In this country, you don't have that yet. So as long as you work hard, you get a good grades, you'll be able to go on to a next step, given the opportunity. And of course, if you work hard, you'll be given opportunity to pass the test, whatever the test that you're going to be given. But in Japan, because there are so many people, you have to pass the test. Everything you do, you have to pass the test. And if you're a type of person cannot pass the test, you are not going to get wherever you want to go. So because of the, as a necessity, they have to do something like that to select. But in this country, we're not there yet. So that, to me, is a freedom that we have.
Now, you were born in Japan.
Yes.
When did you become an American citizen?
As soon as my father and my mother regained their citizenship back. That was in January 1961. Remember, my father and my mother was born in Hawaii in 1914. So they were born Americans. But when the war started, my father forced to join the Japanese military, so he lost his citizenship. My mother was forced to participate in the general election, so she lost her citizenship. So in 1961, through Senator Fong from Hawaii, both of our mother and father were reinstated the American citizenship. So when that happened, I became automatically American citizen. When I went to sleep one day, I was a Japanese citizen. When I woke up in the morning, I was American citizen. So, So, it was a very, very quick transition.
なるほど。 Boy, I think you've covered pretty much what I wanted to hear. Is there anything else maybe that you wanted to tell me today about the atomic bombing? You covered it very well. I wanted to ask you about Iwo Jima.
Well, the one thing I wanted to mention about the bomb, I mentioned to you that I had a chance to meet
Tibbet. Yes.
Paul Tippett's crew.
Yeah, tell me about that.
It was kind of an emotional meeting. I wanted to tell Colonel Tippett that I do not hold grudges against you and your crew because you were given a mission to accomplish. And unfortunately, you were given the mission to drop the first atomic bomb. So I wanted to tell him that I wanted to shake hands with him. I just want to tell him that I was there and I was able to survive the bomb. And the Colonel Tippett were reluctant to shake hands with me first. I don't think he ever realized there were survivors in there, half a mile from the radius center. But I assured him that I do not have any grudges. And I wanted to shake hands with him and tell him personally that you had a mission to accomplish. So you shouldn't have to feel anything other than that. And he appreciated my comment and he shook hands with me.
That was here, wasn't it, in Salt Lake?
No, at Wendover.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of ironic that we happened to came to Utah where they were trained, and I was invited to speak at the 40th anniversary, but I didn't have a chance to speak because the night before that I was supposed to speak, there was a guest speaker from Japan, and they condemned the crew. He condemned the crew for dropping the bomb. And I feel different. Done is the done. What we need to do is, from here on forward, we got to make sure that people is aware how horrible the nuclear weapon is, but also at the same time, we cannot use that against anybody. And to me, that is my whole goal of my mission, is to tell the people how horrible it was, and so I never want to talk about whether was it the right decision or the wrong decision. I just want to go on.
How do you think Tibbett feels or felt about what he did?
I think, he's a human. I think deep inside, he might tell you up front that he was doing his mission. But I think deep inside, he felt that I wish he wasn't me. But somebody had to do it because it was ordered by the President of the United States to go ahead and do it. So I'm sure deep inside he wishes that he wasn't himself. But I'm sure up front, if you ask him that question, he said, I was doing my mission.
Where does he live today? You said he's still alive. Where's he at?
I think somewhere in Midwest, somewhere.
He's pretty sick, you said? Oh, boy.
But, I had there was a observation plane that was taking pictures And the federal workers, actually a person that was in the tail gunner taking pictures, worked here in Salt Lake City. His name was Doug Sherwood. And as soon as he found out that I was there, every time I used to see him, he break down in tears. And so I kept telling Doug, just get off your feet, you know. I'm here, I'm alive, I'm in perfectly good health. It's not your fault. You were asked to fulfill the mission, and that's what you done. So don't you ever forget that. I'm here. And he and I got to be a real good friend. But I think he passed away now. But every time I used to see him, he used to cry openly. So I think, you know, a lot of these crew members, deep inside, not in the facade, deep inside, I think they all feel I wish it wasn't me. Because one bomb done such a damage, tremendous amount of hardship to these people. And the hardship still continues. Even today, after 60 years, people are still dying from radiation effect. And so it's just horrible to use that. Hope that nobody uses it ever again. And the funny thing about it is that today that bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is midget compared to what we have today. I mean, you're talking about tens and thousands of more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Imagine, it's incomprehensible to even think about how powerful this weapon that we have today, you know.